Welcome back. This is part 2 of a tutorial where I'm taking a strategy already published on YouTube by Trade and Get Paid and writing an EA to implement the strategy. This is the strategy on screen now, and I'll include a link in the description below. I haven't reviewed or tested this strategy. I'm just showing you how to write the EA for the strategy. There is a review by Trade Pro, and I'll also add a link to that review in the description. The strategy is partly subjective, and so I've created some rules to convert this to an automated strategy. In the last video, I covered my interpretation of the strategy and developed a working expert based on the indicators with entry and exit criteria. The strategy also calls for a partial close when the price reaches a 9-period simple moving average, moving the remainder to the break even and then taking profit at the middle of the Bollinger Band level. This is the part that wasn't covered in the last video. So today, I'll begin with the code already developed and make modifications to implement the partial close of the strategy. I won't be specifically going over the earlier code, so if you haven't seen the first part, I recommend you watch that first and then come back here. I'll leave a link to part 1 in the description as well. So now let's get started with the code. I'll be doing all the editing in the MetaTrader 4 editor, that way I do everything in one place. I'm going to be starting with the files that I created in the part 1 video. So if you haven't seen that video, you might have some trouble following along. So I recommend you watch the part 1 video and then come back and watch this video. And I'm just going to start by copying these files that I created in part 1. And I've created a new folder here, 10 to 50K V2. I'm going to copy all of these files into that folder to begin with. So now I have these 4 files open, and if you remember from the first video, in the MQ4 and the MQ5 files, I've cut them down to almost nothing. They basically just have these property statements and an include of this common file. So this way, the MetaTrader 4 compiler can compile this file, MetaTrader 5 can compile this one, and then all the common code is in the common file and the class file with some of these if-def statements to separate statements that are different between MQL4 and MQL5. So I won't need to touch these two MQ4 and MQ5 files, nothing changes there, but we'll begin with the common file. Now the strategy as I built it last time enters on the price crossing the outer Bollinger Band and takes profit at the 9-period moving average. So I have the definitions in the inputs here for the Bollinger Band and for the moving average. But the part that I didn't cover last time, because we ran out of time, was that the strategy calls for closing part of the trade at that 9-period moving average and letting the rest of the trade run to the middle of the Bollinger Band. The strategy also mentions a third stage where you can let more of the trade run to the other side of the Bollinger Band, but the rules around that are much more subjective, so I'm not going to cover that. I'm only going to do 2 parts. Rather than take an approach of closing part of the trade at the 9-period moving average and letting the rest run to the middle of the Bollinger Band, I'm actually going to open 2 trades, and that way one of them will still close at the 9-period moving average and the other part of the trade will close at the middle of the Bollinger Band. So because I'm going to make 2 trades, I need to make some changes to the inputs to begin with. There's no change to the definition for the Bollinger Bands or the moving average. Profit and loss ratio stays the same, but I'm going to change the magic number a little here. So what I'm going to do is have an input here that I call input magic number 0 and another input magic number 1. So this is the same magic number as here, and I'll just get rid of this line now. And you'll notice this second input magic number 1 doesn't have an input statement here, it's just int. And I'm declaring that as magic number 0 plus 1. So now I have 2 magic numbers, which my defaults will be 13 and 14. And that way I can apply a different number to each of the 2 trades to be able to identify them. And now I'm going to do something similar with the volume. So I'm defining 2 trade volumes here, and I'll get rid of the old line. Volume 0 will be the first part of the trade that closes at the 9-period moving average, and volume 1 will be the size of the second trade that closes at the middle of the Bollinger Band. So this approach also lets me specify different sizes on those two parts of the trade rather than always closing a half or a proportion. And now to actually place the two trades, I'm simply going to use the class twice. So I've already defined a class, see current trade, which we will have to make some changes to, and I've declared a variable, current trade. I'm just going to declare that as an array of size 2, and that will hold the two legs of this trade. And now because I have two legs of the trade, I have to create two objects, and they are slightly different to the original. I'll leave the original there for a moment and just insert these. Alright, so I've left the original there so you can see what we're doing. The first line, moving average factors, is the same. The second line, the Bollinger Bands, are the same. The profit and loss ratio is then the same, but here you can see I'm passing magic number 0 into the first call and magic number 1 into the second call, so the two objects know which magic number they're dealing with. The trade comment is common. The trade volume, I'm passing in volume 0 and volume 1. And then I've added one more argument to the constructor, and that is the leg number, 0 and 1, because the two legs do behave slightly differently. So leg number 1, which is the leg that will move all the way to the middle of the Bollinger Band, needs to move the stop loss price to break even when the trade for leg number 0 closes. And also, instead of just having this one test at the end, I now test the init status after each of these, because if either of these two constructors fails, I want to simply return a failure. Let me clean up the old code here. And then that means that if we get through to this point, I can return init succeeded. In the onDinit, I have two legs to delete. And I could easily do this as a loop, but since there are only two legs, I'm just going to repeat these statements throughout the code. If I had more than two statements, I would probably put a loop in and treat them all that way. Now, just before I make the changes to onTick, there are a number of changes to the class to introduce new functions and remove some old functions, mainly because I need to be able to handle the two legs and the interaction between them. So I'll go to the class first and make those changes, and then come back to the onTick, because then the functions will make more sense here. And the first change in the class, you remember back in the constructor I've added an extra argument for the leg number, because the two legs are slightly different. So I'm just going to enter the leg number as a member variable here. I'm also going to set up the values from the indicators as member variables, because I'm going to set up a function where I can calculate them once and the values can then be used in other functions. So these are the main member variables: the moving average, the upper band for bars 1 and 2, lower band for bars 1 and 2, the band mid price for bar 1, close price 1 and 2, and the current bid and ask prices. Nothing else changes here. These MQL5 values remain. These functions are the same. But here I've added the leg to the constructor. And then I need to store that leg variable in a member variable. This initialization of indicator handles for MQL5 remains, and I'm still calling the find current ticket method. That remains from the last part 1 video. The destructor is the same. MQL5, we need to release the handles to these two indicators. And now the new functions. The first function I'm going to write is to perform this logic. I'm taking it out of this tick function and making it a separate function to basically check if the current ticket is still open, and that's because I'm now going to want to call that independently from outside. So I'm calling this function check if closed, So if we're currently tracking a ticket in the mCurrent ticket variable, then I'm going to call the isTicketOpen function to see if that ticket is still open. If it is open, I'll just return from here. And if that ticket is not open, then I just set that current ticket number to 0, meaning that we no longer have a current ticket. This isTicketOpen function is a function that we wrote in the part 1 video. And the next function I'm creating is to perform all of these calculations on the indicators and the close prices and bid and ask. And I'm moving that out to a separate function, and I'm also just changing these variable names to be the member variable names. So all the same code from the part 1 video, just change the variable names to be the member variable names, and this fill buffers is still the function that was created in the part 1 video, and I still have the separation between the MQL4 and the MQL5 section because the calls to the functions are different for those two. The next function I'm going to create is basically taking this logic and simply returning a value to indicate whether I've got a success for a buy condition, or in this case for a sell condition, and it will return an integer. So if the conditions are correct for us, well actually this is for the sell, if the conditions are correct for a sell, then it will return a -1. If conditions are correct for a buy, it will return a 1 and return a 0 otherwise. So I can also call that from the outside and determine whether a trade needs to happen. So this is my get open condition. So if the close price 2 is above the upper band bar 2 and close price bar 1 is below the upper band for bar 1, and the moving average is above the middle of the band and the moving average is less than the bid, which is the current entry price for a sell, then I'll just return a -1, so the condition is correct for a sell. And I simply do the reverse for a buy. So here I'm just saying if the price has re-entered the band from below and the current price is below the moving average price and the moving average is below the mid price, then I return a 1 and the condition is correct for a buy. And if I don't return from either of these two conditions, then the condition isn't right for opening a trade, so I'll just return a 0. So that's basically moving a lot of the logic out of this tick function. So I'm just going to replace the rest of the tick function. I'm calling this replacement function open on condition, and I'm passing in that condition. So this function will know whether I'm opening in buy mode or sell mode. Now one change, the take profit previously was just the moving average price, but now because I have a different take profit depending whether it's leg 0 or leg 1, I've changed this to a condition, and if the leg number is 0, then I'm still taking profit at moving average, and if not, I'm taking profit at the band mid price. Just a placeholder for the stop loss. So I'm here saying if the condition is greater than 0, so we're in a buying mode. So in buying mode, the stop loss is the entry price minus, this is the difference between the moving average and the ask, divided by the profit and loss ratio. Now stop loss is the same for both legs. I'm going to set the stop loss at both of them as being a 1-to-1 or whatever your ratio is from the take profit price for the 9-period moving average. And then I call the open trade method, which we also wrote in part 1, and return. And then simply the opposite, if the condition is less than 0, meaning we're in a selling mode, then the stop loss is just reversed. The bid plus the difference between the moving average and the bid divided by the profit and loss ratio. And of course, if condition is 0, we shouldn't have called this in the first place, but it won't pass either of these tests, and so we'll simply fall out if condition is 0. Now the next function I need is to set the break even, because leg number 1 has to be able to move the stop loss price to break even. And that's different for MQL4 and MQL5. So for MQL4, I'm placing it in this section where I have the if-def MQL4, and I'll place a similar function here in the MQL5 section. So let's start with the MQL4 version. I'm calling this the set break even function. And the first test, if M current ticket is less than or equal to 0, return. So if that's less than or equal to 0, it means I'm not currently tracking a ticket for this leg, so there's no break even to set. Then I'm going to perform an order select on that ticket, and if I can't select the order, then I'm just going to assume that it has closed and disappeared from memory, and so I'll just return at that point. Now I'm casting this to an int. mCurrent ticket is defined as a ulong so that I have a commonality between MQL4 and MQL5, but the order select function wants an integer. It doesn't generate an error, it generates a warning at compile time, but I'm getting rid of the warning by casting this to an integer. And then I'm calling the order modify function, passing in the order ticket with the order ticket bracket, so that gets the ticket number for the currently selected order. I'm getting the open price for the currently selected order. It's one of the arguments to be passed in, although you can't change the order open price. And the next argument is the new stop loss price, and I'm just passing in the order open price from the current order. If you want to allow for things like spread or commission, you may want to replace this with a function to calculate a stop loss price, but I'm just going to set the stop loss to the open price. And then the next argument is the take profit, and I'm just passing back whatever the current take profit price is for that order. And then the order expiration, which is a required argument, but it has no value here. I'm capturing that as a Boolean value, although I'm not doing anything with it. So this will tell me if the order modifier was successful. I'm not going to test that here. You can add some tests if you like. And that's the end of the set break even function for MQL4. If we go down to the MQL5 section, I'm just going to place it in front of the open trade function. It is only slightly different. So for MQL5, I used position select by ticket to find that position. And if that's unsuccessful, then I'm just going to return. And if position select by ticket was successful, then I'm using the trade object that I created earlier, calling position modify, and the arguments to that are just the ticket number, the new stop loss price, and the new take profit price. And I'm using the position info object here, which I also created earlier, and you've seen that in part number 1 of this video, to get the open price. So the new stop loss becomes the open price, and the current take profit is just being passed back in as the new take profit. And that's the end of the set break even for MQL5. Now that's the end of the code that I need to change in this class. There's also this new bar function which is no longer needed here because that will be in the common code. So I don't need to remove it because it's harmless there, but I will anyway. So now to go back to the common code, I said we need the new bar function, so let's put that in straight away. And this was covered last time, so I won't describe it any further. The on tick changes significantly because we not only have to place the trades, but we have to manage the relationship between the two legs. So I'll remove that call first, and there are three things that we need to consider with this now. First is that we don't want to open any trades if there is a trade still open from either leg. Second is that when we open a trade on leg number 0, we also open a trade on leg number 1. So there's no second set of conditions for entry. They both open at the same time. And finally, when the trade on leg number 0 closes at take profit, we move leg number 1 to break even. Leg number 0 may close at stop loss, but because the stop loss for both legs is being set at the same price, they will both be closed at the same time. So we're only really dealing here with the trades reaching their take profit point. So the first thing I'm going to do here is call that check if closed method on leg number 1. This will just set it up and determine if the trade that it's been tracking has been closed. Then I'm going to check the current ticket number for current trade 0. So for leg number 0, I'm actually checking the ticket number before I check to see if that ticket has been closed. Because what I want to do here is detect if that ticket has been closed since the last time we went through this loop. So if there is a current ticket there now, and then I check to see if it's closed and it is closed, I'll know that I have just closed it, and then I can do the break even logic for leg number 1. So once I know that there is a current ticket being tracked, then I call check if closed. And now if the current ticket is equal to 0, I know that that ticket has closed since the last time we came through this loop. So this is the first time through the loop after that ticket is closed, and this is the point where I want to move leg number 1 to break even. And then I call that set break even method on leg number 1. So that handles all the break even logic for that second leg. Now I just need to handle the opening logic. So first, I only want to open a new trade if this is the beginning of a new bar, and there's the new bar function call, and if there are no trades open. So I'm testing both leg number 0 for the current ticket number being equal to 0 and leg number 1 for the current ticket being equal to 0. And since I've recently called the check if closed method on both of these, then I know that these are going to accurately reflect whether there is a current ticket open. So if both of those return 0 for ticket numbers, meaning there are no open trades, then I can carry on. The first thing I'm going to do is update the indicators, calculate all the values from those indicators. I'm doing that for both legs. Now, there is some logic I could perform here to only do it once, but I don't want to overcomplicate things here, so it's easy enough to just call it twice. And then I'm setting a condition variable, and this is using the getOpenCondition method. So now I know after this that condition will hold a 1, a -1, or a 0, depending whether we have the current condition met to open in a buy or a sell, or no condition met to open at all. So I say if condition is not equal to 0, so it's either a 1 or a -1, then I go to current trade 0, leg number 0, and I call this open on condition method, passing in that condition. And I do the same for current trade number 1. So notice here, I only called current trade 0 get open condition because the condition's the same for both legs. The open condition is the same, so I don't need to call both legs. As soon as current trade 0 or leg number 0 tells me that I've entered the Bollinger Bands from above or below and the other conditions are met, it's the same value I would get back from calling leg number 1. So I just need to call that once. And that's the end of the on tick loop. So that will take care of moving this trade to break even and entering new trades. And I think that's everything. So I'll just try compiling this. Made a mistake here with that comma, so I fixed that. Go back and try again. That's better, no errors there. And if I compile the MQ5 version, no errors there. So those are the changes that will allow you now to open two different legs. They have different magic numbers. They're separated by 1, so you may want to introduce different logic for that if that's not the way you want to handle it. But they need different magic numbers so that the 2 legs can be managed separately by the same class. Otherwise, the logic for opening the trades, closing the trades is the same. And all I've done is add some management in this common area to deal with moving to break even and testing that both legs are closed before I open a new leg. Now, as I mentioned, there are some clever things I can do to simplify this, but I thought that it was easier to go through a fairly straightforward method where I'm basically referring to them as current trade 0 and current trade 1 and repeating some statements, rather than introduce logic that might be a little bit more complex and hard to follow. If you want to see how I would tidy this up and make it just a little tighter, then leave comments and I might do a short follow-up video in the future on that. But otherwise, this is my interpretation of the strategy that is claimed to have turned an account into $50,000 in 2 years. I'm not making any comments as to whether this works or not. I have left links to that video and to the review video by TradePro, so you can tell for yourself whether this is a strategy you want to use. But the logic here is quite useful anyway. That's the complete expert as I've interpreted it for this strategy for both MT4 and MT5. If you think I've misinterpreted the strategy in some way, then leave a comment and I'll see if I can make an amendment video for that. Or if there's another strategy that you'd like me to review and try to convert to an EA, then leave a comment and a link to that strategy somewhere. And if it's suitable for converting to an automated trading expert, then I'll look into that as well. If this has been useful to you, then please click the like button, and it helps us on YouTube if you do. And if you want to see more of our videos, then click subscribe, and then if you click the bell icon, you'll also be notified when we release new videos. Thank you for watching.